I know it sounds strange, but death was actually one of my favorite parts of residency. But I should probably explain that because that sounds pretty weird. Um, when I think about my residency and the moments and experiences that were most moving for me and most profound, this came in a total surprise. I don't think I realized before I started my residency and was really in the hospital what I would feel around those moments. And I have like a very vivid memory of my first experience with a patient dying when I was an intern. So I was a first year doctor. I was on a call shift. It was like a Sunday night, and it was a patient, and I can't remember if it was actually my patient that I was taking care of through the day, or it was somebody I was covering, meaning another one of my residents in my class was taking care of them. And I got called because the patient was on the cancer floor. They were filling up with fluid. So it got called as a rapid response, meaning like, this is urgent. We need a doctor to come address it. So I respond, respiratory, all the different people. We all go there to check out what's going on. And I can like literally picture what room he was in. He's like a very small little patient. He was probably in his 70s. And I remember he was an attorney. He was very kind. He had history of lung cancer, had been in the hospital a while. At this point, it had metastasized all over his body, and his lungs were like filled. Like usually, most of the time, if you look at an X-ray, you can't really see much. But if you looked at his X-ray, it was like filled up with cancer. And because he had so much cancer in his lungs were filling up with fluid. So they had to put in a tube that stayed there permanently that they could just drain the fluid, and it ended up being like a lot of like blood and other types of liquid, and that was what was coming out. And despite that, he was short of breath. He was going into like respiratory failure. um, and we had to make the decision, had to ask him, like, if this progresses, like, do you want to be intubated? And I'm pretty sure he was still full code, but he, at that moment, was like, I don't want to. He's like, please call my wife. So now it's like a Sunday night at 9 o'clock. It is the intern's responsibility to make those phone calls, and those can be scary as shit, man. And you get good at making those conversations, but they're scary because, imagine that this is a husband, a man in his 70s, has lived a whole life. And now he's in the hospital and he's asking, he doesn't want to be intubated. He wants to ultimately, like, he feels like this is his time to pass. And I have to call his wife now and explain to this. And I got on the phone with her and I just explained what was going on. And I explained that, he doesn't want to move forward with intubation and he really would like you to be here with him. And obviously she was frantic, but he'd been sick a while. So I'm sure it wasn't really unexpected. And she said, okay, my niece has to come pick me up. She's like, I can't drive at nighttime. And I don't know if she asked me not to leave him alone. I'm not sure. I can't remember those details. But hang up the phone. Everybody goes back, right? The nurse is doing what they need to do. Everybody kind of goes back to what they need to do. And I just had this feeling, I'm like, I don't want to leave him. It's either I didn't want to leave him by himself, or I felt the wife asked me, or I told her that I was going to. So I grabbed one of the little carts with a computer on it from like the nursing station. And I wheeled it into his room and I sat there on a chair. I lowered the computer and I just sat with him. And, he wasn't really talking. He was just like resting. And I remember I put on like a Hallmark movie. It was around Christmas time. I put on a Hallmark movie and I just sat there with him. And we didn't talk or anything. And of all the things I did as an intern, working, right, taking care of patients, this felt so important to me. It felt like I was like fulfilling a purpose by being there. And there's something to be said about just giving your patients your presence. That's like the most valuable thing you can give your patients or anybody in your life, is just really, truly being with them and just being there without even having to say anything. And I just sat there with him. And then eventually his wife came. And I remember there were a bunch of us in the room. Like, I was there, the nurse was there, respiratory, I'm pretty sure, was there. I'm pretty sure they were like fiddling with the tube on the floor, and the wife comes in and he looks at her and he goes, honey, he's like, I love you. He's like, but I'm done. He's like, I'm ready. He's crying. The wife's crying. I'm crying. The nurse is crying. Respiratory's like has their head down in the tube, but you know that they're had tears. And it was sad, but not sad in like a traumatic way that the deaths of like COVID were, because that's like a really stark contrast. It was like sad, but like watching like a sad movie that has a beautiful, not ideal, but has like a beautiful ending. And I think there's something to be said about providing a setting where people can make that transition to their next phase, whatever it is, whatever they believe, in a place that's peaceful with people that love them, with, places that they feel supported. And I felt like I did that, or we as a team, right? His care team, his nurses, everybody, like we were able to provide that for him. And that was like my first experience with death in the hospital. And it kind of leaves you and you go home and you're very sad, but it like sits with you. Like I don't think I'll ever forget those moments. And I think there's also something to be said about, as a doctor, a lot of times you feel obligated and you feel like it's your job to fix things. And I think that's why a lot of doctors get burnt out and tired, because you always feel like everybody's coming to you with their problems, and some things you can fix and other things you can't. And it can feel very overwhelming. And especially as a new doctor, this is something I had to learn, and I got a lot of, advice around it. And you'll see like more seasoned doctors don't feel like they need to fix everybody's problems. They're able to just take it, do what they can do, and then they're okay saying like, I can't do anything further. But I did feel a lot of pressure and like obligation around like being able to take care of people and fix their problems. But when it comes to something like this, where, death is inevitable, and all you really need to do is just be present and, create a peaceful, safe environment that allows them to feel comfortable during these moments. I felt like that's something that I could do very naturally. It didn't really, it didn't really feel like work to me. It felt like it was a privilege for me to be there. And I always think about that, because we had those types of experiences, but then also the experiences of COVID, right? So I was an intern, meaning I was in my first year being a doctor when COVID happened. And those deaths had a very distinctly different feeling. It just felt so much more traumatic. These were people who were like relatively healthy, relatively young. They went from being fine to being super duper sick, to literally going into like multi-organ failure. On top of that, not having their families there. You just imagine, you put yourself in their shoes as the patient, one like going through all this stuff and you can't breathe, and they're talking about putting tubes down your throat and you have all this oxygen on and they're telling you to lay on your stomach. And imagine you're in a room and you're basically in a room by yourself, because the nurses just come in and out, all the medical staff, everybody's fully gowned up, and just that lack of human connection and people being there and just being so afraid that you're by yourself. And then you think about the families at home. Like my dad was hospitalized with COVID. This was one of the peaks later on. And I can't imagine. I brought him to my hospital because I wanted him to be taken care of by people that I trusted, and also to be able to be there with him. You know, I can't even imagine. It was hard enough being able to be there. I can't imagine what it must have been like for the families not being able to be there with their loved ones. And one day I'll make a video about my experience with my dad being in the hospital. Honestly, the fact that he is alive is a miracle, the way things happened. And I couldn't be more grateful for the people that took care of him, the doctors, my resident team, and the nurses, like angels, literally the best people in the world. But to contrast the death that I experienced as an intern and then what happened with COVID, it was much more traumatic during that time. Probably because we couldn't give them this peaceful, beautiful transition into this next phase of whatever it is. And it came very much as a surprise, right? It's a very traumatic experience because they weren't supposed to die, right, in all our eyes. But who really knows what's, meant to happen. So if I had to give advice to myself 10 years earlier around this, I would say, don't be afraid of death and experiencing that in the hospital setting. You are more valuable as a human being in those moments than you are as a physician. And sometimes just being there, right? Like sitting with that patient, or the priest is called to give last rites and you stand there with the family while they're all praying. Even as when I think about myself and I think about if I was the family member or I was a patient and a doctor prayed with us, that gives me like goosebumps, because I feel like it's taking medicine and taking this love and care for caring for people to a whole new level, where we can like unite in faith, no matter what faith you have, right? Whatever you believe in, I'm here to support you. And it's like, I'm not just supporting your body, right? Like I'm here to support you as like a soul transitioning. Ooh, that gives me like, that's, I really love this topic. It's very weird, but I really love this topic. And I have done so much research into near-death experiences, understanding, what goes on around that time. And it is fascinating. And I definitely want to talk more about this. And maybe in another life, I could have been a good palliative care doctor, but here I am on this path. If this video is interesting to you in any way, if this has been helpful, please like and subscribe. I'm looking forward to creating more videos like this that are super interesting topics that I think will spark really interesting conversations.